Yeah, well, you used a phrase that I actually believe is the key to the whole thing, and lots of people talk about IP technology. You said IP opportunity, and that's a key difference. Lots of people are struggling with this. It's for all kinds of reasons. Some of them are really straightforward, just lots of bits moving very fast, deterministic, real-time, all kinds of things that the internet and IP was never designed to deal with at the start. But people are finding solutions to that. People are innovating every day. And the industry is starting to see, maybe not a holy grail, but at least a goal where, among other things, workflow will be seamless. And ultimately, you'd appreciate this, ultimately it offers a kind of contradictory set of things. Incredible standardization in the sense that, you're talking about common off-the-shelf hardware, Cisco switches, RJ45 plugs, all stuff we know about. Nothing that's particularly sexy or interesting. And all of the sexy and interesting stuff is happening in very standardized ways, which is why people are talking about protocols. That's the big discussion about this right now. Is what are all the agreements we need to ensure that simple functions, a copy, whatever, move this file from here to there, actually happens in a way that's reliable and predictable. But the really exciting part about it for me is that standardized infrastructure creates a flexibility and the possibility for what I think of as a creative or artisanal layer on top. The world we're talking about is a world that's right now available only to people who are filmmakers and work in a very individual artisanal model. You pick your camera, you pick your editor, you pick your workflow, you shape it all around your project, you shape it around your idea. That works great in that environment. It works really badly at scale. I work for a large broadcaster. I've got 3,000 editors. So at the end of the day, what I need is someplace where every one of those people who's editing can actually have the benefits that a craftsperson, an artisan, an artist has in picking their own tools. And yet, because of scale, the enterprise, sorry, I keep hitting the microphone, the enterprise itself is able to maximize the value of the content and distribute it. So it's kind of a mind twist, because at one end you've got this really creative layer at the surface, and at the core it's just standardized. It's like, and the other thing about it, which I get excited about, is something that for broadcast people is an absolute revolution. And this comes back to your point about opportunity. IP by itself, what does it offer you? Well, fewer cables, more complexity, maybe cheaper hardware, but if you're in a world where you have to translate from one thing to another, it's not at all clear it's cheaper. It could be another way of doing things. And, one can imagine a kind of minimalist world where what we did is simply replaced every SDI box with an IP box, and we had fewer cables and we all cheered and went home. That would be a disaster because we missed the opportunity. The real opportunity is to size your infrastructure to precisely the job you want to do. And again, it comes back to this mind twist around artisanal work. A filmmaker does precisely that. They decide exactly what they need and where they need and how they need it. And typically, they go and rent it for the period of time that they need it for. They don't worry about it afterwards. They don't worry about it before. For a company like mine, right now, we have to build our infrastructure for peaks. So we're an Olympic broadcaster. That means our distribution in our plants has to be sized for the incredible flow of content, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of content that come out in 10 days or 2-week period. It's got to be sized for that. The rest of the time, when we're not doing Olympics, we've got a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of attention, a whole bunch of definition wrapped up in infrastructure we don't need. And the way to think about it in an IP world is that if you can get to that place with standardized technology, and what the box does is defined by software. You don't know what it is until you ask it. If you get to that world, you can also get to a world where you can have a bunch of compute and a bunch of storage, which is sitting there, and it's, in my operations, a news operation as well, you've got at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, all of a sudden every editor in the building is busy trying to file their story and finish it up, and you need a whole bunch of transcode and a whole bunch of storage and a whole bunch of compute to deal with it. But an hour and a half later, you don't need that. And so you can translate the load to something else. You can translate that computer storage to something else. And if you go even further, you could think about, well, why do I care where it is? Because in the IP world, you shouldn't have to. So I end up in a place where maybe because I want to be really, really sure that I can do my job every day, that I've got some minimal amount of infrastructure in the place. But when I need more storage or more compute, I burst out and I go to AWS or some other Google or somebody else, and I rent it for the minutes or microseconds or whatever it is, the cycles that I need. It's a concept which actually has a label in business school. It's called supply chain management, and it's never, ever, ever operated in broadcast. So it is revolutionary. It changes everything. It changes the way we think about things. It changes the way we think about engineering things. It changes the way we think about how we operate. It changes thinking about, in that world fully realized, things would be cheaper because you've got less stuff except when you need it. But it also changes another way, because we're talking about software-defined tools. I can actually have people who are happier and more productive because they've got precisely the tool they want. So that's the excitement. To me, that's the big opportunity, and that is a revolution that's on our way. The trick is, in everything you do, resources are limited. They're always finite. There's no such thing as a situation. There's no free lunch. And what you can give them in a company like mine, my company exists because of creativity. My company exists because it's a company full of storytellers. We spend an inordinate amount of money on stuff that has nothing to do with storytelling, has nothing to do with creativity. It's stuff that moves signals around. It's processing. It's necessary stuff in the world I grew up in and I've always known. It's absolutely necessary. Why do you need that? Because you can't do it any other way. That's the answer. Until we get to the new world. And then all of a sudden there are choices. So what I can offer people is more of the money will be going to things that matter to the end user, to the consumer, to the creator. More things will be going into that storytelling process, that creative process. It'll be richer, it'll be more flexible, it'll be faster. And it's not an easy win. It's I'm talking about it at a kind of a lofty level, and we're all very practical people in this business, and you can see the eyeballs rolling. But at the end of the day, that is the win. That is the win. And finding your way there is the trick. And it's not easy, it's the complexity just of IP itself is a little bit scary to people in a broadcast world. And then you add to it this whole concept of supply chain management requires a kind of deeply agile, deeply embedded software set of tools that knows what's in your workflow and what you're trying to do and how to make it work. And the fact that you need a transcoder right now and you don't need one in 10 minutes, and it knows all of that. And that's really the bleeding edge of this whole thing. There are a couple of people here at the show who are way out on the edge working on that. Larry Kaplan, who runs a company called SDVI, and Janet Gardner, who runs the Perspective Group. And they've both been thinking about this as they've watched the potential come forward for several years. They're just getting to the point where they can talk to people like me, and I kind of start to get it, you know, because the world has changed enough. But the tools aren't there, not yet. So it's, and as we talked about earlier, we don't have the fundamental agreements yet on how to make IP work, although we're real close. It's all of those things, but I think at its essence, it's something more fundamental. Because we've seen other businesses that actually use IP. Industrial Control is a great example, where they actually were able to come to standards pretty quickly. I think the difference about our business is it's hyper-conservative. And my favorite example of that is something you'll find in every movie set, an Apple box, which is an absolute clone of an Apple box from an orchard in 1915 in California. And why are they still there? You get splinters from them, they break, they're heavy. You know, why are they still there? They're there because people know them and they serve a great use, and you don't have to teach anybody about them, you don't have to talk about them, they're just there and they work. And I think there's an inherent conservatism in our business because it is media, it is ephemeral. It's not like producing hard goods that underlies all of these things, and I think that's a big part of it. What I can say, and I'm tremendously excited about it and tremendously gratified as a member of the industry, is I think the set of conversations about IP have moved faster than any conversation I've seen about standards in the broadcast world in my entire career. So that's good news. Yeah, no, I think ultimately scale is what wins, or what should win, and if it doesn't, then they try again, because ultimately that's what it is, because it affects all the other things. But at the end of the day, I think the dynamic on this is a very positive and creative one. You've got tremendous innovation happening on the engineering level as the people are trying to describe these standards and how they work. You've also got an unprecedented collaboration that's global in scale of people who maybe are in other facets of their lives competitors, who are sitting at tables working together and just trying to get shit done, you know? And at the end of the day, maybe that's a cultural shift that we've all experienced, but it's good for this discussion. I think that conservatism, the one other thing I'd say is that conservatism that I mentioned is really deeply rooted, and it's our biggest enemy. There's that old saying, you know, the only thing we have to fear is ourselves. And at the end of the day, we really need to lean into this one. Sure. Sure it is, and the real impact. You know, you think about the amount of money that flows through a broadcast network in a day, and then screw that up because somebody can't figure out where a signal is in an IP stream. Somebody's gone. I don't think they're polluted. I think that there is a healthy skepticism, and skepticism is a good quality. It's a good thing. And I think there are massively talented people working on this problem. Whatever they agree to will be reliable. Absolutely, by definition, because we won't do it if it's not. Having said that, it's always the human factor, you know? I work in a company that has a whole bunch of excellent broadcast engineers who've been broadcast engineers for, you know, all their lives. And they understand what goes on inside a cable. They understand what goes on in HDSDI. They know it inside out. When we're into this new world, it's a whole new world. It's a jungle. and comes back to innovation, comes back to the kind of risk-taking that we'll need to take. And we will find solutions. At the end of the day, this is not going to be a disaster. The benefits of the opportunity are too large. We'll get there.